God and wisdom of truth of etc., etc., and I think that he just got completely blown away by what the answer to his question was. And it is very significant, I think, that Crowley identified with Kelly instead of Dee, because Dee would be the obvious choice. He was the significant historical figure or whatever. Kelly was a known counterfeiter, known forger, known liar. But that could also have a lot to do with why the angels chose Kelly at that point in time. I don't know, I think about that. Like these are the questions. If the power of seeing was something that they particularly gave to him, and he had the option, it was like an office. In the Greater Key of Solomon, there's a point where they say, the archangels aren't individuals; they're offices. So it's like you might be talking to different spirits at different times. They're just occupying that position at that point in time. Like, if you go to see the manager of McDonald's, it's always going to be the manager of McDonald's, but it might be a different person every time, like when you go to different McDonald's and so on and so forth. As crude an analogy as I understand that is, that's like how I can try to put it out there. And I think that Kelly was essentially occupying that position at that point in time, and that was what the angels were trying to say. But I mean, they didn't choose him for no reason. They didn't just choose him because he was around. Then they could have had the choice of Saul or whoever, someone who was more convenient for Dee. That's one interpretation. Another interpretation could be that Kelly was very convenient for Dee, because at times that he tried to run away and go do other things and get out of Dee's grasp, he was also a compulsive gambler. So he would disappear for a little while, and then he'd run up some debts, and then Dee would just buy out his debts and have a judge sentence him to indentured service to him, so that he didn't have to go find him again. He was pretty much legally beholden to come back and work for him, and working for him meant scrying for hours and hours and hours. There's points when the angels are dictating tables and stuff, and Kelly's just I'm so hungry, please let's just stop, I want to go eat something, or I'm so tired, and Dee always makes note of that, which I always thought was particularly cruel.
You think Kelly is painted to be this kind of almost criminal type element, but
he was a criminal.
Society was a lot stricter back then. How do you think he would measure up today?
Well, no, I don't think it was about the strictures of society. It was he was counterfeiting checks and forging people's signatures and stuff like that. He had his earlobes cut off for that reason, because in England at that time, the way of, if you're writing bad checks, they cut off your earlobes so people know not to take your signature seriously, basically, because they didn't have social security numbers. But I mean, he was a criminal, and he was honestly his own books. Waite has a translation of, not translation, but a reprint of some of his writings on alchemy and stuff like that. It's very uninspired. It's not really good. It's not bad, but it's very stiff kind of stuff. His own work on its own was not really impressive. And everyone says that, and I always doubt what everyone says, but if you actually read it, then it's a waste of time. But I think that the motivation to paint him as someone who's fooling Dee is ludicrous in respect of that, because the people who try to make that argument, they're oh, Kelly was so bad, he wasn't good at anything, and blah, blah, blah. And then how did he fucking fool this genius political spy? Dee was a spy for Queen Elizabeth, for Christ's sake, and, a genius in many ways. Okay, what your argument is the charlatan horse thief fooled one of the greatest minds in Europe at the time. Okay, fine. That totally makes sense. But I think the motivation is just to get away from it. And it's interesting to see the reaction the scientific community has to Dee, because they can't get away from him. He's still an important historical figure, but they really don't like to talk about the fact that he was into angels and shit. That's not a happy making thing. And that he was consistently continued to practice this until the end of his days. So, when Dee and Kelly break off, they kind of go on their own for a while. Kelly gets imprisoned essentially because the emperor at the time, and I believe it was Prussia, I should have read about this before, but whatever. Doesn't matter, not important. Gets thrown in prison, basically because the ruler of the state thinks that he can make lead into gold. because he's been telling people this. Whether it was true or not, hard to say. John Dee's son actually said that he saw Kelly make lead into gold at one point. But he was a kid, so whatever. And then he dies either because he's killed by the guards, or he's trying to escape, or he got the chance to escape and he slipped or something. Like, again, like every part of this guy's fucking story is cloudy. But Dee just kind of went back and was ready to go on trial. After Queen Elizabeth died, the next king was very hostile to Dee, but at the same time, he was still perfectly happy to go back and risk trial and risk witchcraft accusations and so on and so forth. Just because he was certain that his work would stand for itself. But then again, we're not talking about this work because this is what he tried to hide from everyone. Very likely because he knew what would happen if it got found.